Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2022. This is an event created for BookTube by Vin at Revenant Reads. He created it last year with Book Trek 2021, designed to celebrate Star Trek fiction in all of its endless permutations. And we have shortened the event to 2 months this year. So the first month, August, is almost over, is the Wrath of Book Trek, and this is where we're looking at the first half of Star Trek fiction. The first half of Star Trek, really. Which is the Roddenberry-influenced era, the shows that you will know right away off the top of your head. The original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. Which has 90% of the novels that have been written about Star Trek have been written about those properties, that shared continuity. And then we have a break for September, and after that we will deal with the Kelvin timeline of the J.J. Abrams movies, and also New Trek, Alex Kurtzman's New Trek, which is 5 more shows, but virtually no fiction has been written about those shows. I would argue because those shows don't have many fans. But we'll be talking about all of that in September. Right now, we're still dealing with the old continuity, the old shared continuity. And I spin the wheel every night to see what Star Trek I will read, and I hit upon a Voyager novel that I read when it first came out about 20 years ago. I decided to give it a reread. I mentioned yesterday that Star Trek Deep Space Nine took a lot of chances with its basic premise, removing us from the roving adventures of a starship, for instance, giving us a black man as a main character who's not even a full captain when the series starts, introducing politics and religion far more prominently than they'd ever been in Star Trek before. And Star Trek Voyager returns to a lot of the safe territory of standard Roddenberry Star Trek, but it does take some chances of its own. The safe territory is that we have a ship, and we are following a ship and a crew. So it's not a roving cast. There are no additions or subtractions. It's the USS Voyager, which is a different kind of a different class of starship from Constitution class starships. It's smaller, has more punch. Initially, we're told it has a kind of a neural network to aid its computer processing. So there's a biochemical element to its computing. Not as much is done with that as should be done with it. Is Voyager sentient? The show rapidly stops mentioning the neural networking. It stops being an important part of the plot. But Star Trek Voyager gives us those traditional elements. The Voyager is moving from adventure to adventure. And there's no coming or going because of one of the innovations of Star Trek Voyager. The Voyager is catapulted against its will 75,000 light years away from the Alpha Quadrant, from the Federation, by alien technology that is then lost. So Voyager is stranded on the other side of the galaxy, where even at maximum warp in a straight line, it will take them 70 years to get back home. That's innovation number one, which is, what does a starship do if it's surrounded by unknown quantities without Starfleet or the Federation to draw on for support? Disaster could loom at any minute in such a situation as that. That's innovation number one. Innovation number two, that wasn't so much of an innovation even at the time that Voyager started, was that it has a female captain. Catherine Janeway is the captain of Voyager. There are a couple of other minor innovations. Another craft that is thrown into the other side of the galaxy is inhabited by the Maquis, who are terrorists, who are being hunted by the Federation. And Janeway decides that since we're all in the same boat, and since your ship was destroyed, I will integrate the Maquis crew into my own crew, even though they're pretty much arch enemies. And she does, and as a foremost gesture of goodwill along those lines, she makes the captain of the Maquis vessel, a man named Chakotay, her first officer. The highest ranking officer on the ship, other than her, to sort of bring the two crews together. And that's what Voyager was for season after season. I was a big fan. I really, really enjoyed the show. I thought it was, in some ways, very pleasingly cerebral when it wanted to be. Voyager has its bad episodes, as any Star Trek incarnation does. Voyager also has what is widely regarded as the worst single Star Trek episode of any franchise before Star Trek Discovery, in which every episode qualifies. But we'll be talking about that in September. Star Trek Voyager has a notoriously awful episode. We don't need to talk about it. But Star Trek Voyager also has some great episodes. Episodes that really get at the heart of what Star Trek is, I think. As you would think it would almost necessarily have to do, right? Because if you've got a starship that's flung across the galaxy, then the principles that guide its mission, they're set in higher relief, because there's no one seconding Captain Janeway. There are no other captains that she can just sort of commune with. So what do? If you're a starship on the other side of the galaxy, surrounded by potential enemies, what do? That is the larger subtext that runs throughout Voyager. And that larger subtext can make it a little difficult to write an effective Voyager novel, but the smaller subtext, the one that I mentioned, the traditional subtext, that the ship is moving from planet to planet, that makes it easy to do. We don't have any idea how many adventures Voyager has had. That's not true of, for instance, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. There are no epical events that happen on Deep Space Nine after Benjamin Sisko arrives there and before he leaves that we don't know about. It's a static environment, so that the showrunners just made it a day-to-day story. Whereas with a roving starship, even in settled Federation space, you can squeeze in all kinds of adventures without upsetting things. You can squeeze in all kinds of what the old show referred to as bottle episodes, which means we greet the crew and everything's fine, something happens, they solve the something, and then we end with everything with them being fine. Basically comedy, a sitcom structure. So that, because that's true, you can get in a lot of that with Voyager without interrupting the continuity. The only way that the continuity will really work its way in will be that something happens in the continuity of Voyager at midstream that separates the show into before and after periods, and you're going to have to deal with that. And that something is a character named 7 of 9. Voyager is thrown into the Delta Quadrant, and the Delta Quadrant is home to the Borg. So right from the beginning, fans were wondering, well, when will Voyager encounter the Borg? And when they do, they encounter a drone named 7 of 9, who was a human. She was a human girl who was assimilated by the Borg when she was a child, as were her parents. And in a complex series of events, Voyager rescues her from the collective. They disconnect her from the collective, and they remove most of her Borg implants and try to make her human. And 7 of 9 becomes an unofficial member of the crew of Voyager, and sets up an enormous dramatic dichotomy there. There's a tension between her and Captain Janeway, a kind of a mother-rebellious-daughter relationship. They got Jerry Ryan to play the part. Jerry Ryan was a beautiful young woman. I had my worries about that. I had my worries that you're just doing this to goose, so to speak, the ratings. But Jerry Ryan also did a fantastic job as 7 of 9. She just, you forget, some viewers would forget right away that she's gorgeous in silvery spandex and just concentrate on what a resonant job she does, bringing 7 of 9's struggles to become more human to life. It's a powerful acting job, is what I'm trying to say. And there was only one other powerful acting job being done in Voyager's cast, and that was Kate Mulgrew as Captain Janeway. So I believe completely the apocryphal rumors that there was a lot of on-set tension between the two of them. It quickly became the Janeway 7 of 9 show. And fiction has to reflect that. Where are you going to set your fiction? Are you going to set it when 7 of 9 is not part of the story? Well, you run a risk there, because fans like the Voyager storyline with 7 of 9 rather than without her. They like the set of variables that she introduces. And if you set it after she's there, well, then you run the risk of it becoming a 7 of 9 story, as so many stories in the show did. She just commandeered it. Because, she has access to all of this Borg technology, and she has she's not part of the official command structure of Voyager. That makes her the ultimate X factor to throw into any plot. I think the show handled that fairly well. It got a little predictable at times that a whole episode would be driven by 7 of 9 going rogue, but I think they handled it very well. I think they kept it under control, but it becomes a question for novels. And I randomly picked a novel by Eric Kotani. I don't think I've ever read anything by Eric Kotani. And I read this when it first came out, and it didn't do anything for me 20 years ago. I thought, well, okay, it's a science-based novel. You learn a lot about stellar cartography and neutron stars and whatnot, but there isn't a whole lot of character development, I thought, and the plot itself is fairly weak. This is the book. It's Death of a Neutron Star. And it begins, as so many Voyager episodes do, with Captain Janeway seeking to help someone in the Delta Quadrant. She made it her mission, her response to being trapped so far away from the Federation was to go on being a Starfleet vessel. So exploring, seeking out new life and new civilization, still trying to make a beeline for the Alpha Quadrant, but they're not going to just ignore the world around them, and they're not going to ignore calls for help. And they get a call for help. They see an opportunity to help someone at the beginning of this story, an alien shuttlecraft, and that quickly embroils them in a fight that those aliens are having with another group of aliens, also a repeated theme in Voyager. And in addition to that fight, which Voyager is now a part of, there's also a catastrophe that could possibly be artificially induced involving a neutron star, the death of a neutron star, which is a rare enough stellar phenomenon so that Voyager wants to examine it. Janeway is a rare example of a Starfleet captain who came up through the sciences. That wasn't true with Kirk. It wasn't true with Picard, as far as I know, or very lightly with Picard. And I don't think it was true of Benjamin Sisko either. I think but Janeway is a scientist first and a starship captain second. So she's naturally interested in the death of a neutron star. And I can't say that this novel did anything more for me this time than it did 20 years ago. It is good. It is enjoyable. I never wanted to stop reading. The characters are mostly in character. I thought there was a little bit of inconsistency with the show, with established canon continuity, maybe in the interactions of Captain Janeway and Lieutenant Tom Paris, who is the navigator of Voyager and has a rough, checkered history. He is essentially the rebellious cadet in a really good Star Trek The Next Generation episode where Wesley Crusher is taken under the charismatic pull of a cadet. And that cadet was played by the same actor. So I don't know what the mechanism was. I don't know what the backstage mechanisms were to somehow at the last minute make Lieutenant Paris not that character, even though you're casting the same actor and the character has the same backstory. I really don't understand that. I also like, for instance, in Star Trek Enterprise, the talk forever in the planning stages of Star Trek Enterprise is that the Vulcan subcommander on the bridge of Captain Archer's Enterprise would be T'Pau. Not T'Pol, but T'Pau, the ancient Vulcan that we meet in Amok Time. That fell through. Same thing with making Captain Archer, Captain April, all that fell through. It just causes problems for continuity wonks. I'm not really sure why that is, but anyway, Tom Paris is a popular character on this show, and he's a bit of a rogue. He's the one who will pipe up with a quirky or seemingly somewhat irreverent comment in a tense bridge moment. And Janeway puts up with it because he's brilliant and because she's trying to make a better Starfleet officer out of him. But I think she puts up with a little too much in this book. I remember thinking that when I read it 20 years ago, and it's still true. I didn't expect the words on the page to change, but I thought maybe I would come to it different. But this was kind of it was enjoyable, but it was an average read. I could see the resolution coming a mile away. You know already that virtually nothing of a fundamental nature is going to happen in the course of the story. It was a bottle episode, in other words, only in book form. Which is okay, but I kind of want to end the Wrath of Book Trek, with some standout reads. And this wasn't one of them. I've had a few in a row that weren't one of them. I had one that was really good this week. But so who knows what the spin of the wheel will be tonight. Maybe I won't spin the wheel. Maybe I'll just go to something I already know I like and revisit it. There's nothing wrong with doing that for Wrath of Book Trek. It's next month that I won't be able to do that. Fortunately, I will take that frustration out on you. But anyway, that's my Book Trek for today. I will see you next time. Thank you, BookTube.